Hey guys, okay, let me start this presentation. Okay, here we go. So excuse my demeanor. That's what happens when you don't feel well. I am going to be lecturing this way so that you are still getting the content even though I'm not in the classroom right now. All right, so we're going to start off with autism spectrum disorder. The slides before, it's where I left off, so now this is where I would be starting. ASD, or autism spectrum disorder, is a developmental disorder. It's not any kind of like psychological, mental illness. It's a developmental disorder. And the problems that range with this disorder are the way that people think, feel, how they maybe relate to other people, and their social skills. You'll notice that some people appear to have lower social functioning than others, but there are different ranges of autism, different spectrums, and this usually appears during the first 3 years of life, and there are myths that are connected with ASD that have been debunked, and I have put two links on Google Classroom for you guys to check out because I have an assignment attached to it. So that's this right here. You're going to go to Google Classroom and you're going to click on those two links, and then I have an assignment attached to that about autism. All right, so I'll go into autism more when we get into the other disorders, but one thing to note about autism is that there was a diagnosis before, and it was Asperger's syndrome. That is no longer diagnosable. They got rid of that out of the DSM, and now it's just autism with different spectrums. So if somebody is diagnosed with Asperger's, then they still carry the diagnosis, but anybody that's newly diagnosed won't get that diagnosis anymore. Okay, so moving on with temperament, I briefly went over that last week. Psychological and social development of infants and children involves developing their personality, developing their relationships, and then having that sense of them being male or female. Because when children are first born and they're toddlers, they have no idea that they're male or female. They just know that they're this little person that they see in the mirror sometimes. So some ways that they demonstrate their personality is through their temperament and through attachment. So temperament is behavioral emotional characteristics that are fairly well established at birth. So you have your easy temperament children, your more difficult, and then your slow to warm. So your easy ones are those like what you would call perfect children, the ones that never cry, they sleep all night, they're generally always happy. Your difficult ones are pretty much the opposite, can be pretty fussy, their sleep schedules are irregular, they don't like any type of change, and they often to appear what they call crabby. And then your slow to warm, that's just a different variation. They're less grumpier, quiet, slow to adapt to change, but they will warm up to people in new situations. It just takes them a little more time. All right, so what you need to know, anything, remember that I said that's underlined. Make sure you know that for the final. Temperament styles are strongly influenced by heredity. So this follows the genetic side. So the nature-nurture that I talk about, this is going to go on the nature side of the debate. A difficult infant raised by parents who are loud and active usually is a good fit for that. Because how children are sponges and they really feed off of their parents. So if parents are highly anxious and highly irritable, that really just kind of melts onto the child, and they too can become very anxious and difficult. So a poor fit can make it difficult to form an attachment with parents or anybody. Okay, so there is a video that right here you can watch. I'm not going to put that up on here, or I'm not going to play it right now, but go ahead and watch that video. So attachment, what it encompasses, emotional bond that forms between an infant and a primary caregiver. So if that attachment is not formed, then the infant is going to have some difficulties when they're a toddler and even into their teens and adulthood. It's formed within the first 6 months of the infant's life, shown in a number of ways during the second 6 months, such as stranger anxiety and separation anxiety. Stranger anxiety, just in a nutshell, is the wariness or like cautiousness of strangers. And then separation anxiety is the fear of being separated from the caregiver. So usually when a child becomes anxious about being separated from a caregiver, they're going to cry, scream, grab their parent's leg or arm. Usually there's this period of time where kids are totally okay. And then there's this other period of time where children, if you're going to have this issue, then children become very clingy to their caregiver. So Ainsworth was this researcher, and she conducted infants to strange situations and identified 4 different attachment styles. So you fit into one of these 4 styles. There's secure, avoidant, ambivalent, and then what's called disorganized or disoriented. So you're secure, so again, it's underlined, so I want you to know this. Your secure attachment style is going to be they explore happily, and then they're upset when mom leaves, but then as soon as mom comes back in the door or caregiver, then the baby is okay upon the mom's return or the caregiver's return. The avoidant, willing to explore, don't touch basis, react very little to mother's absence or return. So basically what that's saying is now the child, the baby, is upset that the mother has left. So now the reaction is going to be very little when mother returns. It's kind of like, oh, mom, I'm mad at you, whatever. Ambivalent, clinging, unwilling to explore, upset when mother leaves, and then angry with her on her return. So now the child is ambivalent, really upset when mom leaves, and then in turn is very angry with the caregiver when she returns. And then the last, disorganized or disoriented, unable to decide reaction to mother's return, approach mother with their eyes turned away from her, or the child will avoid eye contact altogether. So it's kind of like that, how dare you leave me? And I don't even know if I'm going to look at you or not. So those are kind of like the 4 attachment styles that are associated with this. Cultural influence on attachment. Mothers in the U.S. tend to wait for a child to express a need before trying to fulfill that need. Japanese mothers prefer to anticipate the child's needs. Attachment is an important first step in forming relationships with others. So generally speaking, it's very important for the caregiver to form that bond with the child at the onset of their life, because that's going to be very indicative of their future relationships. Of course, in, United States, it's very normal for parents to wait until their child cries before wanting something. And then the parent goes and takes care of that child's needs. Whereas in Japan, in Japanese culture, the caregivers do like to anticipate. So they like to get in front of it. And they're always they're always on top of the situation before it's bad. Excuse my congestion. I am not feeling well, but I still have to power through this. All right, Harlow's monkey experiment. I do want you to watch that. That is something that you will see on your final. This is just a little video about the Harlow's monkey experiment. So basically, there's this wire surrogate mother, and she provides the food for this infant, which is a monkey. But the infant spends all of this time on this cloth covered surrogate. So it looks like it's really wacky looking, but just watch it and you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's a really interesting experiment into the earliest investigations about how touch is important in forming those bonds. All right, so self-concept. Infants begin life without understanding that they are separate from their surroundings and also from the other people in their world. They slowly learn to separate me from the physical surroundings and the other people in their world. Self-concept is the image you have of yourself. And so basically, when you're an infant and a toddler, you have this idea of me, me, me. You're very egocentric. You don't realize yet that that there are not other people in this world but you. So infants and toddlers tend to think that the whole world revolves around them. And I find that even some teenagers think that. But anyways, moving on. All right, so I'm going to skip that. Okay, so I told you that you needed to know Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, and you are to do that assignment already and turn it in. But so Erikson focused on the relationship of the infant and the child to significant others in the immediate surroundings, parents, and then later teachers, and then peers. So it's all in developmental stages. So he, again, you should know this by now, but he proposed or developed 8 stages of psychosocial development, all the way from infancy into adulthood. And so the crisis in each stage must be successfully met for normal, healthy psychological development. So you may be a teenager, but you're stuck in a crisis. So you might be stuck in a previous stage. Okay, so here are, which you should already know this, but stage 1, 2, and 3 are listed here. And then I'm going to go into the stages. But if you want, just look at these. So you have the stage, you have the crisis, which is what I told you to know, trust versus mistrust. And then if you successfully deal with the crisis, then that's what's going to happen. And then, so for the first one, if babies' needs for food, comfort, affection are met, they develop a sense of trust and they can trust people in the future, and then they move to the next stage. If they are unsuccessful in dealing with that stage, then, so if babies' needs for food, comfort, affection are not met, they develop a sense of mistrust, and then they do not expect their needs to be met in the future. So they're already being set up for this mistrust when they turn into toddlers and preschool, and then eventually adolescence and into adulthood. And then it just goes on. So I've already put this in here for you to look at and view. So the assignment I gave you should be fairly easy. Again, you're putting this in your own words. Okay, so moving on into adolescence. So, 13 to 20s, this is kind of like where you guys are at. This is the period of life where young person is no longer physically a child, but you're not quite independent, living on your own. For the most part, I do understand, with students or kids that kind of have to help parents out due to, issues of money. But psychologically speaking, you're not quite there yet. So the teens obviously are from 13 to 19. The thing that's going on or concerns with how a person deals with life issues such as work, family, and relationships, you either handle it well or you don't. There's a clear age of onset, and then the end may come earlier or later for different individuals depending on your psychosocial development. Sign of the beginning of adolescence is the onset of puberty. So you've got your physical changes, the primary sex characteristics, and then your secondary characteristics, a result of complex series of glandular activities, your environmental factors, and then your puberty takes place around 10 years old for girls and about 12 years old for boys. And of course, the ages can vary, just a little bit. All right, what's underlined again, I want you to know. So make sure you write that in your notes. Development of the brain continues well into the early 20s, though changes of puberty are relatively complete after 4 years. So your development does not really complete until you're 25 years old. So this is why a lot of teenagers take on riskier behaviors, and even people in their early 20s, and that's because your brain has not fully developed yet. This is not an excuse for you to, it's not an excuse for you to do all these crazy things, but there is an explanation as to why somebody does these riskier behaviors than a 30 or 40-year-old. They wouldn't think to do anything like that because their brain is fully developed. They fully understand consequences of actions. So this is why. All right, so cognitive development, less visible than physical because that's cognitive is thinking. It's not something you can see. Piaget's final stage of formal operations is abstract thinking, which is like the search for an ideal world. Egocentrism and introspection emerge as the personal fable and imaginary audience. I'm going to skip over this because you don't really need to know any of this type of stuff. Moral development, that's understanding. So the theorist in this is Lawrence Kohlberg, and he kind of came up with his 4 stages of moral development, which is the understanding of right and wrong. And I will go over those. He had some criticisms to his theory because it was male-oriented. It was biased towards Western cultures. And it involved asking people what they think should be done in hypothetical moral dilemmas. But these are the Kohlberg stages. If I said 3, if I said 4, I meant 3. Pre-conventional, conventional, and then post-conventional. So basically your pre-conventional, so I want you to know an example of these. So the pre-conventional stage basically says, okay, if you had the ability to cheat on a test, then you would do it. You would just do it. So I would cheat if I knew I wouldn't get caught. So stage 2, I'll let you copy mine if you do my homework. So that's kind of like a pre-conventional example. So it's more of like the Freudian id stage, which I'll go over later, but that's kind of like you want to avoid punishment, but as long as you're going to get something in return and you're not going to get caught, that's what's going on in that stage. And then the conventional is stage 3 and 4, good child, law and order. Example they give, I'm not going to tell because I want her to like me. So maybe you want to say something, maybe something happened. You want to say something, but you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to tell because you want that person to like you, or you want to be viewed as favorable. And then when you get to stage 4, you can't do that because the teacher said no. So you take on more of this law and order of starting to try to do the right thing. And then post-conventional, you've got stage 5, the social contract, stage 6, the universal ethical principle. So in stage 5, in this case, the rule may be wrong. In stage 6, you shouldn't lie because it violates the golden rule. So post-conventional, all these theorists have all of their different, rationales for morality, and Erikson, Piaget, Freud, Kohlberg, whoever, they have their own stages. But for Kohlberg, in this post-conventional stage is you don't do the wrong thing because it's not right. So it's not about you not getting caught. It's just you are a good person and you're not going to do something wrong because you're not supposed to. So that's what that is. All right, so parent-teen conflict. Listen, I already know teens are always clashing with their parents. There's always going to be a certain amount of rebellion. Most teen parent conflict is over trivial issues. Usually it's not a big deal. It's over the things like in the slide: hair, clothing, taste in music. I mean, if we were in class, we would be talking about what the issues are in your world. But we're not. All right, parenting styles. You definitely need to know the parenting styles. This is on, this will be on your final. Taking a drink break of Naked Green Machine. This is making me feel better. Looks gross, but tasty. All right, so you have, for extra credit, all you have to do is say Green Machine. Then I know you watch this. All right, so you have your authoritarian, your authoritative, and your permissive parents. So you can kind of gauge what parent you have. So your authoritarian parent is the one that was like my dad. It was do as I say, not as I do. So very stern, demanding, wants perfection, controlling, does not compromise, and has a tendency to use physical punishment. Although my dad never did that. I'm just throwing that one out there. Then your authoritative parent, which is the type of parent I am, that is your balanced parent. They combine warmth and affection with firm limits on the child's behavior. So instead of when a child gets in trouble, the punishment has to fit the crime. So if my child skipped, let's say, which believe it or not, they haven't, but let's just say my kid skipped, then I'm not going to ground them for a month because that doesn't fit the crime. And I don't know, maybe all three of my kids didn't skip or didn't really do anything because we had a really open relationship. I put clear boundaries and expectations on them. And I let them be free to be who they are. I just, they knew my rules and I respected them and they respected me. So knock on, this isn't wood, this is, I don't know what this countertop, it's my sea glass countertop. But anyways, if my child did something wrong, then first we're going to talk about it. And I'm going to say, hey, what happened? And they're going to tell me, well, so-and-so did this, or my teacher said this. And I'm going to say, okay, is this really reality? Or, could you have misunderstood? But basically, you're not just going to jump the gun and get mad at your kids and punish them. You're going to listen to the whole story. You're going to have boundaries because, believe it or not, kids like rules. They need rules, and they just don't want to be punished for things that they didn't do or punished ahead of time because a parent thinks that they're going to do something wrong. So authoritative parenting is that balanced type of parenting. And then you have your permissive parenting, where parents don't really put any demands on their child. And you'll notice that they're the kind of children usually that run the house. So they're the boss of their parents. And usually you see those on that TV show, oh my gosh, like Scared Straight, or that like boot camp kid show. I can't really remember it. But so you've got your authoritarian that's like, whoo, you do what I say. And then you've got your permissive parent that is like, oh, do whatever you want. And then you've got that middle authoritative parent that is like, okay, you listen to my rules and do what you want within reason. And that's the story. So you want to strive when you get older to be this middle parent, if you can. All right, so then you have permissive neglectful and then permissive indulgent. So the neglectful permissive parents, they're not involved with their children, ignore them, and allow them to do whatever they want until it interferes with what the parents want. So then the parents kind of turn and they're like, you're disrupting my life. So that's the neglectful. And then the indulgent parents seem to be too involved with their parents, allowing them to behave however they want. So the permissive indulgent parent is more like the child's friend. So some even party with their kids. So those are the difference. That's the difference between the two. All right, so moving to identity versus role confusion, which is one of Erikson's stages. Values in life and beliefs concerning things such as political issues, career options, and marriage. Usually, kids kind of adopt their parents' beliefs about everything until they get older. Then they kind of have their own belief. Successful teens of the earlier 4 stages are much better equipped to resist peer pressure. And then not successful teens come into adolescence with a lack of trust, feelings of guilt and shame, low self-esteem, and become dependent on other people. All right, so I'm going to skip this. We can skip on through this. I'm not really going to go over this stuff. Physical development, again, through Erikson stages, young adulthood, middle age, late adulthood. So emerging adulthood, time from late adolescence through 20s, refers mainly to those in developed countries who are childless, do not live in their home, and are not earning enough money to be independent. Then you have 20s. In your 20s, this is your peak. After your 20s, it like goes downhill. Even though you may feel great, that's kind of like what they say developmentally. So in your 20s, that's when you're like sharp. I wouldn't say that's when you're at your best, but it's kind of like when you're peaking. In your 40s, your vision, hearing start to decline. I can definitely vouch for that. Except my hearing is still great. It's just my vision. I had to get LASIK so I can see far. I just can't see close. Skin begins to show more wrinkles. Hair turns gray or falls out. You got to get it colored. No, mine's not bad. Excuse me. Height begins to decrease, especially in women because of osteoporosis. So you might have been 5'5", now you're 5'3". In women especially, estrogen declines, and then your body you don't have the reproductive capabilities anymore. So in 50s, women go through menopause. In 60s to 70s, hearing loss becomes very noticeable. Ugh, what a downer. All right, so effects of aging on health. You really need to take care of yourself because if you don't, these are some of the common health problems that will happen as you age, and that doesn't look fun. So take care of yourself. Use it or lose it. Super important to use your brain all the time because you don't want to develop Alzheimer's. And if you have that in your family, that runs in your family, that's a neurodevelopmental, or that's falls into the neurodevelopmental disorders. We'll be going over that more later. But you want to exercise your brain. So when you retire, still do stuff that's fun, have a hobby, but you always want to keep your brain going. So do mental activities to keep you going. All right. Adulthood concerns involve career, relationships. College students may change majors more than once. The average, you'll change your major 3 times. Entering a career is very serious. So when you first get your very first career, you'll know it. Those who are working may also change careers several times. It's very normal to change careers in your 40s and 50s. Because sometimes you don't want to stay in the same career. I know I changed careers and I'm glad I did. And I have like 3. So intimacy, if you end up developing intimacy, this is your ability to trust, share, and care, and you can still have your own identity of yourself. Middle adulthood, persons who have found intimacy can focus outward on others. Generativity, which is his psychosocial stage of development, parenting the next generation and helping them through their crisis. So if you master generativity, then you know that you have raised your children well and that they too are going to be, good members of society. Educators, supervisors, healthcare professionals, doctors, community volunteers might be good examples of positions that allow a person to be generative. So Erikson's ego, integrity versus despair. So now dealing with mortality. So this is kind of getting towards the end of life, which is kind of sad, but these are the natural stages of life. So integrity is feeling whole and knowing that you can look back on your life and that you don't have a lot of regrets, that you didn't hurt people, and that you were able to deal with losses in your life. In the final completion of the identity or the ego, it's just being able to say, okay, if something happens to me, I know that I led a good life and I treated people well. And, end of story, my last chapter. But despair, that feeling, and, it's terrible, but people don't realize that suicide is not the highest with adolescents. It's actually higher with the elderly. And if you think about it, most people don't think of that, but it's true. It's a sense of, this regret that you didn't accomplish things in your life and that your time ran out, but you're still here. And so this is why more people will commit suicide when they're older, because they just know that they're older and they kind of left ties open. They maybe they don't have a relationship with their family, their kids. They have no friends. They didn't accomplish the things in life that they wanted to. And so they have all these regrets of all this unfinished business. So that is, it's something that's sad, but it's something that is reality. And then finally, this is definitely on your exam. I mean, everything underlines on your exam, but I really wish I was there to explain this, but maybe we'll go over it again. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross theorized 5 stages of death and dying. So you have denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So I'm going to go through them. I'm going to go through them on dying. I'm going to go through them like the end of a relationship, because a lot of people your age can associate to that better. So denial, refusal to believe that the diagnosis of death is real. So that is maybe getting a diagnosis of cancer where the doctor says, okay, you have maybe 6 months to a year to live. The person is going to be like, oh my God, no, this is not happening to me. It must be a mistake. That's the denial part. You're just not in reality that that's actually happening to you. In the case of a breakup, someone breaks up with you and you're like, okay, no, that's not happening. You're joking, right? Am I on like some episode of Punk'd? No, this isn't real. All right, where are the cameras? Okay, you can tell me you're joking. So that's that denial, is not believing it. And then the anger at death itself and the feelings of helplessness to change things. So now you're angry, and you might be angry at yourself, angry at a loved one, anger at God, anger at, a higher power, anger at anything. And you're just like, why me? Why is this happening to me? I don't deserve this. In a relationship, it's like, are you serious? You're breaking up with me? There's no way you're breaking up with me. No. I'm better than you. And you're just so angry that you blame, in that moment. Okay, so the bargaining stage. So a dying person tries to make a deal with doctors or even with God. So a person that's given a diagnosis, they start praying maybe. And they're like, okay, I'll tell you what. If you just cure me, then I promise I'll be a better person. I'll be a better friend. I'll be a better daughter. I'll be a better son. I'll be a better, child, a better spouse, whatever the case is. You will do anything to bargain your way out of this diagnosis. Or in a relationship, you're like, oh my God, please don't break up with me. I'll do anything to change. I'll do whatever you want. I'll be a better girlfriend. I'll be a better boyfriend. I'll wear better clothes. I won't be annoying, whatever the case is. That's the bargaining stage. And then the depression stage sets in. And that's sadness from losses already experienced and the ones that are yet to come. So the depression kicks in because now you realize that it's happening. So either, dying, that it's imminent, it's going to happen, or with the relationship, okay, it's not a joke, we're not getting back together, and now I have to deal with this new reality. So that depression kicks in. And you can move through stages. So this is not it starts with denial, and then it goes to anger, bargaining, depression, blah, blah, blah. that's the way initially she set up her stages. But we have found that you can go from depression to anger. You can go from bargaining to anger. There is no perfect way to go through these stages until you get to acceptance. And that's acceptance of the inevitable. The dying person quietly awaits death. Or with relationships, you know when you've accepted something when it no longer bothers you, when it no longer eats you alive. So with death, nobody wants to die. It's not something anybody looks forward to. But especially when you're older, you come to this acceptance and you're like, okay, it's going to happen. And you realize that you did the best you could in life and it just becomes accepted and you're okay. Most people go through that. And then in a relationship, you know, when you're walking down the halls and you first break up with someone and you see them and you cringe and you're sick to your stomach and you're upset and you want to punch them in the face or you want to break down and cry, you haven't accepted. But when you can walk in the hall and you see them, you don't cringe, and you maybe still want to punch them in the face, but not really, but you've accepted it, and it doesn't bother you anymore, and you can see them in the hall walking with somebody else, then you know you've accepted it. I mean, it's not fun, but in the end, with relationships, it was probably a good thing. So that's my speech on that one. All right, so criticisms of her theory on death and dying. I just always like to put in the relationship because I can tie that into a lot of things. So criticisms, some people do not have time to go through all of the stages. They just don't. Some theorists do not agree with the stage idea, seeing that like I said before, you can go up and down. There's no right way to face death. It is unique to each person. But I don't know why this is. Oh, I see. I don't have it. It's, I have this in white. I don't know why. But there isn't any correct way to go through a stage, but this is a very good guide into that. So if you're now thinking about, oh my gosh, I was really angry and then I was really trying to like bargain with them and then I was depressed and then maybe I was angry again. Now you know like the stages. It's called DABDA. So DABDA. So the denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. So that is on your final. You definitely need to know that. We're going to skip that. So that's the end of the presentation for this. So I'm going to upload this. Well, by the time you see this, it's uploaded. So why did I just say that? I don't know. I don't even need to say anything because this is the end. But anyways, you've watched it. Thank you. Go ahead and take your notes and do that. And I will have you upload that for a grade since I am not there. And again, if you need me, please feel free to send me send me a message. I'm on Focus or I'll be on with my e-learners every day. So that's that. All right. Until I upload another one, peace out, y'all.